Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Planning for Retirement, What Millennial Women Need to Know. My name is Yumhee Park, and I'm the Engagement and Mobilization Associate at the National Women's Law Center, and today's moderator. We have a few technical notes before we begin the presentations. First, all lines will be on mute during today's webinar. Second, we will be taking questions after our experts are finished with the presentation, but we encourage you all to submit questions throughout the webinar. You can submit a question by typing it using the chat function. Finally, we'll be recording the webinar, and you'll receive a link to the recording of the presentation as well as a link to the slides within the next few days. At this point, I'd like to introduce our speakers today, Elizabeth Sisson from the Roosevelt Institute, and Amy Matsui and Jasmine Tucker from the National Women's Law Center. Liz is the Managing Director of the network at the Roosevelt Institute. She oversees all of the national programs and projects and works closely with the student leaders and their policy projects across the country. Amy is Senior Counsel and Director of Government Relations at the National Women's Law Center. She works on economic security issues, including retirement savings and tax benefits for women and their families. And Jasmine is Director of Research at the National Women's Law Center, where her research and analysis focuses on improving the economic security of women and their families. Her areas of expertise are safety net programs, Social Security, federal spending, and tax policy. She was also a senior policy analyst at the National Academy of Social Insurance and was lead author of the groundbreaking public opinion study, Strengthening Social Security, What Do Americans Want? Now, at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Liz.
Hi, thank you. You want to switch to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start off by talking about a little bit about millennials and retirement, and then we're going to dive a little bit into savings accounts and what millennials should know about Social Security, and at the end we'll do a Q&A. Slide, please. Slide. So if we could hear a little bit more about all of you, I believe we're going to pull up a poll so we can hear when you were born. If you could just quickly answer that. Give folks a couple more seconds. Okay. Great. 44% born in 85 to 90. All right, cool. And I believe we have another question. Are you saving? The question, are you saving? Why or why not?
And I think we're going to do the rest of the polls about saving in the next portion, Liz. So I think we're going to go ahead and jump right into your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I just want to start off with some facts and unpack some facts about millennials and retirement before we dig into some tools and tips. So if you read a few different reports on millennials and retirement, you'll read a million different things. People have differing opinions on what we're doing with our savings and retirement. They're saying we're saving too little, that we're saving the right amount, that we aren't taking enough risks, et cetera, et cetera. There are a few things, though, that you can't really dispute and that are absolute facts, that millennials have a lot of debt and many graduated college in the wake of the Great Recession, meaning we have a lot less wealth than the past couple of generations at this point in our lives. We will also live longer and will probably work longer than earlier generations, and this is especially true for women. And another fact that overall our economy and society for that matter is experiencing major wage stagnation and improving but still present gender and racial wage gap. And we definitely still have some economic inequality, and all of those things impact our retirement. Go to the next slide, please. So some other facts about millennials specifically. We have and have definitely proven to have less traditional careers than other generations. We frequently move around to different firms or organizations. We work more in contracts, gig or freelance work. We're a huge part of the gig economy. We tend to work at startups or small businesses, and we all have kind of the Mark Zuckerberg in us that we want to start our own businesses. A lot of us do. And we will have longer periods of unemployment, and this is definitely true for many folks who graduated college in 08, 09, and 10. And so again, all of these facts kind of impact our theories, strategies, and behavior when it comes to our retirement. Go to the next slide, please. So saving for retirement sounds scary, especially when you're young. You throw in a few words like Social Security and IRA and 401k, and you might be a little bit overwhelmed, but it's definitely not impossible. And so I want to kind of face some of the realities that we're facing, especially for millennial women, and give some more information on how to make that impossible seem more possible. So millennial women will definitely face hurdles. There is still an opportunity and pay gap for women, despite people saying that more women are graduating from college, but women are still only making 80 cents to every dollar, and this is more pronounced for women of color. So like African American women working full-time year-round typically make only 60 cents for every dollar white non-Hispanic men make. So because of that gap, women of every race lose over $400,000 over the course of a 40-year career. There's a few other variables there too. Women tend to have interrupted careers or work part-time, a lot of times caring for their families, caregiving, lots of work to be done in that area, of course, improving, but still. And on average, U.S. women spend 4 hours a day on unpaid work. And again, this is typically in caregiving, whereas men spend 2.5 hours. And just like a general statement, unmarried women typically save less in their retirement accounts. And women also save smaller percentages of their income for their retirement, and their incomes are already smaller. So that again impacts their retirement. The one good thing that millennial women have is time, though. We can start planning now and start saving now, and it will definitely benefit us in the future. And I will also say that personal retirement planning is a responsibility of us as individuals, but as I just illustrated, that does not negate the systemic issues women in particular face. So the workforce is obviously getting better for women entering, but improvements, huge strides need to still be made for women eventually leaving the workforce, or temporarily for family reasons or permanently for retirement. Go to the next slide, please. So I have a few more stats. Just pulled these from some big name. So a recent study by Bloomberg shows that 30% of young workers get around to signing themselves up for their employer-based 401k plans. So again, this is 30%, and it's specific to employer-based 401k plans. And we'll go into the differences later on. According to Wells Fargo study, only half of millennial women have started saving for retirement compared to 61% of millennial men. So yeah, these are obviously two different stats, but one specifying an employer-based plan, the other one not. Fidelity reports that the typical 20-something who is saving now is stashing away 7.5% of income, which is up from 5.8 in 2013. So that's good news. Millennials spend, this is a stat that I think many millennials on this line can agree, that millennials spend the most on debt, housing, and then transportation. And I think that's an important stat to know, just because we don't have a lot of extra money laying around after our debt, our rent, and our subway cards to stash away in retirement. And seeing this is a webinar about retirement, and we're going to touch upon this later on, but I wanted to kind of give a few stats on Social Security. I think a lot of times millennials tend to express concern about Social Security but don't really know what it is or if they'll receive any benefit from it. But I think we really must. We need to learn how to protect it and expand it and use it. So I wanted to share a few stats on Social Security, but again, like I said, we will dive more into specifics on this later. So in 2016, 61 million Americans received Social Security benefits. Then that is keeping 1.1 million millennials out of poverty each year. So obviously this is impacting millennials specifically right now. About 1 in 4 households receives income from Social Security, and this keeps 8.5 million children under the age of 18, and that's impacting them that receive Social Security. Next slide, please. So I just gave you a bunch of stats and a bunch of facts, but I kind of wanted to dig a little bit into the tips. So savings in retirement can be very daunting. Even the word retirement, I think, makes some people kind of shut down. And it seems so far off, but it's really important to start thinking and planning about that right now. So I think one of the biggest things is to kind of break down your financial planning into categories and to create a plan. And so that means creating a budget, kind of analyzing your expenses. Setting goals is really important. We hear this all the time about everything we do, set goals, set goals. But this is something that they're very long-term goals, so you should definitely start thinking about right now what you can do in the short term to impact the long term. And don't let the fear of it, like retirement as a whole or your lack of understanding, stop you. I think you have to just kind of start somewhere and start small, and I think just being on this webinar is a good place to start. Don't let debt or high expenses stop you from saving for retirement. I think there is a false narrative that someone should pay down all of their credit cards and all their student loans before they start saving for retirement. I don't think that's true. I know that's not true. You should try and do both. And another thing, you can't just put money into your retirement and ignore other financial responsibilities. I think financial literacy as a whole is important. So you should understand your loans and your repayment schedules and pay down your high-interest debt, your loans and your credit cards, create an emergency fund, and just overall save. Next slide. Yep. You can always try to save money, and I know that that's easy to say, a little bit harder to actually do. So when people talk about trying to find money in your budget to put away, I think a lot of times they talk about little expenses, but it's a lot of times analyzing your lifestyle. So the classic is, are you buying coffee instead of making your own, or are you bringing in lunches instead of buying them? Those are sometimes little savings, but behind that is kind of a lifestyle choice as well. So you're taking, there's things like, are you taking advantage of pre-tax commuter benefits? Are you in the most expensive part of the city and sharing the space, or do you have roommates? Are you attending the most expensive gym? So those kind of things are kind of like hidden ways that you can kind of try to find savings. I think one of the most important things is actually knowing all of your options, and Amy will discuss a lot of these in a little bit, but know what your employer provides you. Make sure you're not leaving any sort of free money on the table, and I think we'll go into that when we talk about matching. Do you know your Social Security options? Do you know all the lingo? Again, this is daunting, and sometimes the terminology is kind of scary, and I think many times it's set up to be that way. But if you start breaking it down into smaller chunks and taking a little bit at a time, it doesn't actually come out to be that scary. Also, don't touch your retirement. I know a lot of people worry about emergency funds. Build an emergency fund outside of your retirement. A retirement should not be used as something that you rely on just in case something happens. If you change jobs, roll those balances over. And one of the things that was really helpful for me was finding a financial mentor. There's obviously great financial planners out there, and sometimes your employer may provide you with the name of a financial planner you can go and talk to. But you should maybe find someone else aside from your parents that you could openly ask questions to, that they know you personally. I find that very helpful. I know the stress that comes along with savings and retirement when you're young. I know that very much personally. There are a lot of people out there who maybe didn't have parents who talked about retirement, or their parents aren't saving for retirement, or maybe your student loan debt is crippling and you can barely keep the lights on or keep food on the table. So the idea of retirement is a little far off, but that's okay. I think even if there's no room in the budget right now to save, my advice would be start educating yourself on how you would want to save when there is room. I think the earlier the better. Next slide, please. So I put up some of my favorite tools. These aren't all specific to retirement, but I think all of these things are related. So when I'm talking about kind of evaluating and analyzing your expenses and creating a budget and planning, Mint.com has been thrown around a lot as for a lot of people to intro to budgeting. It kind of makes budgeting fun, dare I say. It'll help you kind of analyze your income and your expenses. Another organization, Society for Grown-Ups, has financial planning classes. Elevate Financial is specific for women and their investing information. Acorn is spare change investing, so if you want to understand investing, that's an easy way to start. Digit, another financial tech, is to help build up an emergency fund or savings account. And the last tool that I have here is probably the most relevant for retirement and for this webinar, is a tool by Fidelity where you can actually go in and put your name and the amount that you could potentially be spending towards retirement, and it kind of tells you 20, 30, 40 years down the road how much you would have if you were staying on that same trajectory. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz. I know that the last slide that you're seeing right now is some other kind of recommendations for saving on a tight budget, and these are really kind of reinforcing some of the things that Liz has already talked about. So this is Amy Matsui from the National Women's Law Center, and again, I want to thank Liz for being on the webinar and for giving us a really great ground kind of basics and outline for what we're going to be talking about today. So we really want to give you some more tools that you can use for your retirement saving and thinking about planning for retirement in this overall landscape of your saving and your financial planning. Next slide, please. So the part of my presentation is going to focus on savings accounts. What are your options? The goal here is not to make anybody feel guilty for not saving. It's to give you the tools you need when you're ready to, and to think about ways that saving doesn't have to be overwhelming, but to save what you can and make your money work the best it can for you. We want, especially when you have limited resources to put away and save, you want your money to be used as smart as possible and to get and maximize the tax savings and other benefits that you can get from your savings. So one thing that I want to start off with is just saying that even small amounts can make a big difference in retirement. The slide that you see right now shows that if you invest about $40 a week for 40 years, assuming a very conservative 4% growth, you can have a nest egg of over $150,000. This doesn't take into account the fact that most people can save more as they progress in their careers and their incomes increase. But it's just to assure you that the savings that you can afford will still make a difference in retirement. You can add this income on top of the income that you'll receive from Social Security, and that will make a difference for your retirement. Next slide, please. So we're going to quickly cover some different savings accounts that you can use to save for retirement. This includes traditional pension plans that are offered from employers and retirement savings plans that are also offered at work, like 401ks. And then the last two categories of retirement savings options are don't have to be offered through an employer for you to use. And these are IRAs, individual retirement accounts, and a new vehicle offered through the Department of the Treasury called the MIRA. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on traditional pensions because unfortunately these are not offered at a lot of jobs at the moment. And as Liz mentioned, many millennials and folks who are just starting out in their careers may not be working in a full-time job. They may be kind of piecing together a couple of separate gigs, and so traditional DB pensions are really limited to folks who are working in unionized jobs, public sector jobs. You should sign up for it if it's available to you, but it's just not widely available as it used to be. This is unfortunate, especially for women, because in a traditional or DB pension, nothing comes out of the worker's paycheck. The employer makes contributions to a fund, and then based on how long you have worked in that position and what your average salary is, when you retire, you're going to get a specific amount every month for the rest of your life, and that's why it's called a defined benefit pension, because the benefit that you get at the end is clear and straightforward and set forth. So again, if this is something that you see offered by your employer based on where you're working, if it's working for the government, if it's working at a unionized shop, then you should take advantage of it. But we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about other savings vehicles that more folks have access to. Next slide, please. So employment-based retirement savings plans follow the model mostly of a 401k. So what this is you have an account in your name, whether it's a 401k from private industry, nonprofits have access to 403bs, and you can contribute a portion of your salary before it is taxed. So that means that you're going to have money taken out of your paycheck before the payroll taxes are taken out, and then also before income taxes are taken. You can contribute up to $18,000 in 2016, and for workers who are over age 50, there's something called a catch-up contribution where you can stash away an additional $6,000 until you retire. In addition to whatever you take out of your paycheck and deposit into this account, many employers will match savings. So this is supposed to encourage people to save. And once employees have contribute a certain amount, their employer will, as the name suggests, match savings and put those directly into your account. So this is really something that if your employer offers this account to begin with, look up to see whether your employer offers a match, and if humanly possible, take advantage of it, because that is free money. You are not taking it out of your paycheck. It is coming through your employer, and that can really boost your retirement savings. The way that this kind of account works is that whatever you have put into the account, whether from your contributions or the employer match, and then investment over time, the time value of money to make that account grow, is what you end up with when you retire. And then you will take the money out to help meet the expenses of retirement. Next slide, please. A kind of account that you can save for retirement where you don't need to have it be offered by the employer is an individual retirement account. You can call Fidelity or a bank. And there are a number of different service providers that will allow you to open an IRA for yourself. You can either open a traditional IRA or a Roth, which have different tax benefits. And then in 2016, if you don't have an employer-sponsored savings plan at work, you get tax benefits for whatever you put into your IRA. The limits are smaller, so if you are contributing $5,500 or less and don't have a plan at work, that can be tax preferred, and then a similar type of catch-up contribution for workers over age 50, which is $1,000. Next slide, please. And then in addition, for workers who make under a certain amount of money, so less than $129,000 per year and under $191,000 for a married couple filing jointly, and you don't have retirement accounts at work, you can open a payroll deduction IRA through the U.S. Treasury Department. The benefit of the MIRA is that the investments are in very safe Treasury bonds, and there are no fees. Once your account grows to $15,000, you can roll it over to a private financial services company, but this is a great option for folks who are starting out, who don't have a savings option at work, and who want to make sure that their money is safe and doesn't get reduced dramatically through fees. Next slide, please. So for a lot of folks, the hardest part about saving is just getting started, and so we wanted to talk you through some of the tips and just the groundwork for doing exactly that. The first step is just to find out whether you have a retirement savings plan at work. Find out if you're eligible to participate, whether because you've worked long enough or you have you're over age 21 is generally the level, and what the way is that you enroll. Some employers will automatically enroll you in the 401k or 403b type plan, and you can tell them if you don't want to participate or if you want to contribute more. And then some employers limit starting the participation in the plan to the open enrollment season, which we're in right now. So if you're going through that other paperwork on health benefits or other benefits that are offered by your employer, take a look and see whether you're eligible to participate in their retirement savings plan. This might be the year to get started. Just a reminder that you can start small with small contributions, and you can increase them over time depending on what's going on in your life and what your ability is to save. And then if you are participating in your retirement plan at work, there are a couple of important documents that I just want to put on your radar screen. One is the summary plan description, and that basically is the rules of the road for your savings plan. What are the limits, what are the eligibility requirements, and then important contact information. You also will periodically get benefit statements, which tell you things about how much you've earned overall. When your employer benefits will vest, that means that you have an inalienable right to them. And then some of the benefit statements will also talk you through whether there's any interaction with the Social Security benefits. But it's also only an estimate based on what your future holds. Next slide, please. So I'm also going to, because millennials, as Liz mentioned, frequently have different jobs or don't have full-time jobs and are kind of piecing bits of their career together, I wanted to briefly cover part-time workers, because under law, not all part-time workers are eligible to participate in employer plans. So you need to check with your plan to see whether you're covered if your employer offers one at work, and then if your employer doesn't offer a plan at work that would cover you as a part-time worker, do think about opening your own IRA or My IRA, just as you would if your employer doesn't offer a plan to begin with. Next slide, please. One other thing to think about in the realm of making sure that your money is working at its maximum to grow for you and for your future retirement needs is that there is an additional tax benefit for folks who are able to save for retirement, and this is called the Savers Credit. If you earn up to about $31,000, and if for married couples who earn up to just over $61,000, you can claim a tax credit which offers basically a benefit based on how much you're able to contribute. So this is going to lower your tax bill and could help boost refunds that you get from other sources. So think about, whatever dollars you're able to put away, make them work to their maximum by putting them in a tax-preferred retirement savings vehicle that's earmarked specifically for retirement, and then taking advantage of a tax credit if you can, if you're able to contribute. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to flag a couple of other things. One, because people tend not to spend a lifetime at work anymore, and especially folks at the beginning of their careers are going to move from place to place. You have to think about your retirement savings when you change jobs. So for a traditional pension that is not widely available, one piece of information that you need to know is whether your benefits have vested. Have you worked long enough at your employer, generally between 5 and 10 years, so that when you retire, you're going to get some pension benefits. So that's something that you need to find out before you leave your job if you have a traditional DB pension. If you have a retirement savings plan, your own contributions are always your own, but you may have to check to make sure that your employer match can come with you, depending on how long you've worked at the place. And then what are you going to do with those retirement savings? You can leave it in the plan if you have more than $5,000 in benefits, or you can roll the savings over into another employer plan or over into an IRA. But always make sure that your employer and the plan knows how to contact you and you know how to keep in track of them so that you're not losing those savings that you worked so hard to accumulate. Next slide, please. So one question that Liz also flagged is that when folks are saving, regardless of what kind of account it is, sometimes people have emergencies and they need to access their savings. I do want to reinforce what Liz had mentioned, which is that if it's at all possible, leave those retirement savings to grow for when you need them at the end of your career. But if you can't and you do need to access those funds, you may be able to take out a loan or a hardship distribution from a 401k account if your employer's plan permits it. And this is information that's going to be in that summary plan description about what kind of circumstances will enable you to take money out of your account. You generally are able to take loans out against your 401k or 403b balance. The summary plan description will tell you how much you can take out and what the term is, but you should know that if you leave your job and you have a loan balance outstanding, you may have to pay that back immediately. Those are just things to keep in mind when you're thinking about taking a loan out from a 401k. And IRAs and MYRAs have different rules. Under some circumstances, you can take money out of an IRA, for example, if you are paying off education expenses or putting a down payment down on a home, but you may have to pay tax penalties and income tax on those distributions. But please remember the chart. Try and let your money do its work undisturbed so that you can have it in retirement. Next slide, please. So the last thing I want to flag for you before turning this presentation over to Jasmine to give you the information you need about Social Security is that if you are married, pensions and retirement savings are a marital asset. So while you're married, you may have seen documents that say, require you to put down who the beneficiary is for your retirement savings account, and all that means is that if you pass away, who gets the money. And for 401k plans, when you're working with your employer, that beneficiary has to be your spouse unless the spouse signs a piece of paper and says that they consent to having the money go elsewhere. The same is not true for IRAs, so that's something that you have to check specifically. In addition, if you need to take a loan out from a 401k, as I was speaking about in the past slide, if you are married, you need to get the consent of your spouse because, just to go back to the point, that money is part of your marital estate, part of your marital assets. And then finally, defined benefit pensions also have benefits that go to spouses, and that's intentional to help women and people who are coping with the loss of a spouse and that income. And if you don't want to have that benefit, your spouse also has to sign off on that. And then just to point out to you that if you're a married couple and you end up getting divorced, the retirement savings and pension benefits are part of what gets split in a divorce. It's a very technical and complicated area of the law, and so people need to make sure that their lawyers know how to divide those up. So that's not the best note to end on, but just to say, to reiterate, save what you can, make your money work as hard as you can make it under the tax laws for you so that you can have the benefit of your hard work and savings when you retire. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine to talk about Social Security.
Thank you so much to Liz and to Amy for laying out some of those key points around millennials in the workplace and some of the barriers that we as millennials face in saving for retirement. And I know I'm learning a ton from Amy about how we can start saving, but I want to talk about Social Security and why it's going to be important for your retirement. So Liz already pointed out that, as millennials, we're going to live and work longer than previous generations. And so, like me, most of you participating in the webinar are nowhere near retirement age, right? So why are we even talking about Social Security? Next slide, please. So Social Security is really one of the pillars of the American economy. About 1 in 6 people, more than 60 million people, receive Social Security benefits, and it is the most effective anti-poverty program in the United States. It lifts more than 21 million people out of poverty every year, and that includes over 1 million millennials who are between ages 18 and 35. So you might be wondering how millennials are benefiting from the program if they're not retired, right? But Social Security offers 3 protections, not just retirement protection. It offers protection against disability, and if you die leaving survivors, it will also provide benefits to a spouse or dependents. So ways that millennials could be benefiting, so say they live in a multi-gen household with a parent or a grandparent who receives benefits, they are then benefiting from Social Security. They might also receive benefits because they're disabled, right? So they could be a survivor of a spouse who has passed away. So Social Security, we should think of it not just as a program that provides retirement benefits to older people, but as these three sort of larger protections against loss of income. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we talk about why Social Security is especially important to women, I want to talk about how the program works and why it absolutely will be there for you when you need it, and even if that's sort of decades down the road. So virtually all workers currently pay into Social Security via a payroll tax. So you pay 62 cents for every $10 that you earn into Social Security, and your employer matches that amount. And under current law, only earnings up to $118,500 is currently taxed for Social Security. So that means if you earn over that, you only pay Social Security tax on the first $118,000 of your earnings. So once you pay your Social Security taxes, that money gets put into a trust fund. And that trust fund then pays out benefits to people who are currently receiving Social Security, so maybe your grandparents. And right now, there is a very large surplus in that trust fund. And any surplus in the Social Security trust fund gets invested in U.S. Treasury bonds so that they can earn interest. The trust fund currently has about $2.8 trillion, and it's expected to grow to $2.9 trillion by 2019. So from now until 2019, Social Security is going to take in more from the payroll taxes that we're currently paying and in interest from those U.S. Treasury bonds than it will pay out to the people who need benefits. Then starting in 2020, and this is largely due to baby boomers' retirement, Social Security is expected to take in less from payroll taxes and interest than it will pay out in benefits. So that means that we're going to have to start drawing money down from that trust fund, which remember is going to be nearly $3 trillion at that point. And because we're going to continue paying less into Social Security as workers than the program will spend on beneficiaries, we're going to continue to draw down funds from the trust fund until it is ultimately depleted. And the trustees of the Social Security program anticipate that the trust fund will be depleted at some point in the year 2034. But that does not mean, that absolutely does not mean that the program goes bankrupt. So what it does mean is that if we make no changes to Social Security from now until 2034, when we expect that trust fund to be depleted, the money that we're paying into Social Security as workers will still be able to pay about 79% of benefits well into the future. And also, I want to note that Social Security is only one of two federal programs, the other being Medicare, that is required to submit an annual trustees report on its long-term finances 75 years into the future. And if any other number of federal programs had to do that, the outlook wouldn't look nearly as good. So obviously, 79% of benefits starting in 2034 is not good enough, right? We have paid into the program and we deserve 100% of our benefits, but we have a lot of time between now and 2034 to do something about it. So some things that we can do might be to raise the contribution that each of us pays into the program. So instead of 62 cents for every $10, we might pay 72 cents for every $10. We could also raise the taxable earnings cap that I mentioned earlier so that people who earn more than $118,500 can pay Social Security taxes on more of their earnings or all of their earnings. So there are steps that we can take now to make sure that Social Security does not face a shortfall in 2034. And despite some of the threats that we might be facing over the next few years to Social Security and Medicare, I don't want any of you to worry that it's not going to be there for you. Polling shows that Americans of all ages, even millennials, on both sides of the aisle, support Social Security and they want to keep it strong. And I know that organizations, I will sleep well because organizations like ours, like the National Women's Law Center, like the Roosevelt Institute, and many of our partners are going to remain vigilant and defend Social Security from any attacks. Next slide, please. So let's talk some about why Social Security is especially important for women. So we heard from Liz that a lot of millennials are sort of engaged in non-traditional work, and that's okay. You're likely still covered. About 96% of workers pay into and earn Social Security, and it doesn't matter if you work part-time or if you change jobs frequently or if you're self-employed, you're probably still earning Social Security. And when you do need Social Security, you cannot beat the benefits that you get. You can outlive your other savings, such as your 401k or your 403b, right? You're putting a finite amount of money in there, and when it runs out, it runs out. But you can never, ever outlive Social Security, and your benefits will adjust every year to keep up with inflation. So Social Security is especially important for women for a number of reasons, some of which Liz talked about earlier in the presentation. But first and foremost, it's important because women tend to earn less over their lifetime, and because women face a wage gap and women of color face an even larger, more significant wage gap than their male counterparts, and because they're more likely to take time out of their workforce to care for children or other family members, they tend to have fewer savings than men by the time they reach retirement. And so this means that women are more reliant on their Social Security benefits than men are. So for more than half of women who are 65 and older, Social Security provides 50% or more of their income. And for 27% of women 65 and up, it provides nearly all, 90% or more of their income. So I really can't overstate how important the program is and will likely be for you when you reach retirement. So one other thing I should point out is that Social Security benefits are quite modest. Women who are retired on average receive about $1,200 a month or maybe $14,000 per year, while retired men receive $1,500 a month or about $18,000 per year. And the age at which you claim benefits can impact the amount that you receive from Social Security. So because your benefits last your entire lifetime, once you start receiving them, if you claim earlier, you're going to receive a little less, but it's spread out over a longer time period. And likewise, if you claim later, you'll receive a little more in benefits, but it's spread over a shorter time frame. And so we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But that's why it's so important to start, saving now in a 401k or an IRA or a 403b or something similar, so that you can set yourself up for a successful retirement and to be able to have options and think strategically about when you want to take your Social Security benefits. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do you qualify for Social Security? As I mentioned before, virtually all jobs, about 96%, are covered by Social Security. So there are some sort of local and state government jobs that have other retirement plans, and so those folks are not covered under Social Security, but the vast majority of workers are. So when you work and you pay into Social Security, you earn Social Security credits, and it doesn't take a lot to earn a credit. In 2016, 1 credit is earned if you worked and made about $1,260, but you can only earn 4 credits every year. So the higher your earnings, the higher your credit, the higher your credits will be, and the higher your Social Security benefit will ultimately be when you retire. So you need a minimum of 40 credits, or about 10 years worth of work in order to be eligible for retirement benefits under Social Security. And while you need just 10 years of work to qualify, Social Security calculates your retirement benefit based on your highest 35 years of earnings. So your benefit is higher if you earned more over your lifetime. And if you take time out of the workforce, you can still be eligible to receive Social Security. As long as you have that 10 years or 40 credits, you can receive benefits. However, because your benefit calculation is based on your top 35 years of earnings, if you have, say, 25 years, you have some zeros in there, and so your benefit might be less. So another interesting thing about Social Security is that the timing of when you earn your credits makes no difference. If you have to take time out of the workforce early in your career to raise children or to take care of a sick loved one, you can still catch up and rejoin the workforce later in order to make up the credits that you need or to increase your benefits by working more years at higher earnings and having fewer of those zero earnings years. Next slide, please. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is when to claim your Social Security retirement benefit when the time comes. So you're going to be eligible to claim retirement benefits as early as age 62, even though your full retirement age is later. So, and if you're widowed, you can claim your benefit as early as age 60. So if you need your Social Security retirement benefit at age 62, you have paid into the program and you have earned benefits, and so you should absolutely take it. We've already talked about why it's an incredibly important source of income, particularly for women, and it is designed to be there for you when you need it. So if you were able, though, to start saving early and you've got a nest egg set aside to cover from some of your expenses, or maybe you're able to keep working full or part-time and you can wait to claim Social Security past age 62, you can get higher benefits, and those benefits are going to last as long as you live. So this is especially important for women who tend to live longer than men. So this slide sort of illustrates how much benefits can increase for someone who can wait to claim Social Security. So this example is for someone who is retiring this year and whose full retirement age is 66. But note that as millennials, our full retirement age is going to be 67. So Martina is our example here, and she was born in 1950, and she's retiring this year at age 66. So if she does retire this year, she will receive about $1,000, right? So this is based on her earnings, her 35 years of earnings. So your benefit might be different. So if she claimed early at age 62, her benefit would have been about $750, or about $25 less than if she waited until her full retirement age to claim. And once she begins claiming at age 62, her benefit remains at $750 for the rest of her life, except for those changes every year in inflation. Benefits don't increase once you reach full retirement age if you start claiming earlier. So if instead she waited to claim, she waited until 70 to claim her Social Security, her monthly benefit increases to about $1,320 per month, or about 32% more than her retirement benefit than if she claimed at 66. So the benefit you receive beyond your full retirement age is about 8% per year plus the cost of living adjustment. And so taking benefits later means that you'll increase the amount that Social Security will provide you, and that lasts forever, for as long as you live. There is no other private account that will grant you that kind of return on your investment. And so that's why it's incredibly important that if you can wait and if you can start saving now and think about ways to delay claiming, this is a really great way to ensure that your benefits will be higher for the rest of your life. So that really wraps up what I wanted to talk about that covers Social Security, and now I will turn things back over to Amy, who will moderate the question and answer portion of the presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jasmine, and just to reiterate our thanks to Jasmine for the great information about Social Security, and to Liz for setting the stage for us and giving some thoughts about saving and working and being a millennial all at the same time. So we hope that you've gotten some information that you can use either the tools that you need to be thinking about your future retirement planning or to get started right now, just to know what your options are, what income you can expect from Social Security, and how to put all of these pieces together with your debt and your savings and all of the things that you're facing on a paycheck-to-paycheck basis. So I want to kick off the Q&As with just kind of a basic question for Liz, which is, how do you save for retirement when I'm still paying off credit card debt and have student loans? What's the best way to start looking at the whole financial landscape?
Thank you. So there is definitely not a blanket answer for this. It definitely depends on your debt situation, like how much debt you have, what are the interest rates that you have. Obviously, consumer debt is very expensive, so I would try to pay down the high interest, low principal debt first. But definitely do the math out. Like if what you're paying on the interest of your credit card exceeds what you'd be making, like investing your money, I would definitely pay off your debt. But because starting early for retirement, even if it is a very little bit, goes a long way, I would contribute at least a little bit of money in a retirement account, and especially if your employer matches, like Amy had talked about. I mean, that's free money, so you don't want to leave that. And having it taken directly out of your pay is helpful. It's basically like the money was never there. So I would say try to balance it all, but definitely focus on the high interest, low principal, and save a little bit in a retirement account.
Thanks, Liz. And we did get a question about resources that people can turn to do kind of an overall financial checkup. And, you know, I know some employers may offer that service to their employees. Some banks may offer that along with their other account services. Are there any of the resources that you highlighted that you would point to specifically as offering kind of an overall way to look at your bigger financial picture?
That one for me?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay. The third one so the number 2 and number 3 on my list, so the Society for Grown-Ups for Financial Planning classes, I think just like I said earlier, like I think overall financial literacy is super important. So definitely look for financial planning classes in your area. I think a lot of cities have them, a lot of banks have them, a lot of community organizations sometimes have them as well. And then also Elevate Financial for Women in Investing information is a good organization to look at. They have a lot of different kind of tools like reports and just different tips that women in particular can look at for investing information. And they break it down so it's kind of snackable information. So definitely check out those 2 things.
Thank you so much, Liz. That's perfect. And Jasmine, I have a question for you about Social Security. So we had someone who asked about they're piecing together a couple of jobs where they're working as an independent contractor, and the person wants to know, am I contributing to Social Security through those jobs?
That's a great question. So like we were mentioning, you know, millennials are often engaged in these sort of non-traditional work arrangements. And so, like I said before, 96% of people are covered under Social Security, and that includes contracting, that includes part-time work, that includes self-employed work. And so the easiest way to know if you're contributing to Social Security is to look at your paycheck and to look for the FICA tax. And if that's there, then you are paying into Social Security. And then you can also log into SSA.gov and create an account with your Social Security number, and you can figure out what you have paid into the program, and they'll do some other calculations for you as well. So great question.
Thank you, Jasmine. So I'm going to answer 2 quick questions. I'm going to ask the question of myself and then answer it because I covered the savings portion. So we had 2 questions that came in over the chat function about one is about IRAs and one's about 401ks. So we did have a question that asked whether your contribution to an IRA is vested. And so vesting, I may have thrown that term in, but that basically means that you have the right to access those savings or those benefits. For some things like employer match, the employer may want you to work at the job for a certain amount of time before those matching contributions are yours. And this is actually more relevant for a defined benefit pension where the employer wants you to be at the job for a certain amount of time before you get those future, way off in the future pension benefits on a monthly basis. But if you have an IRA, so that's an account where you have put all of the money in, then all of those contributions are vested. Those are all yours, and you have access to them. The other quick question that I have that we got in through the chat that I'll answer is about 401ks. And so for someone who does have a 401k at work, the question was, if I take another job, I can roll my contributions and what the employer contributes to another 401k with another employer. And the answer to that is generally yes. So most employer 401k plans will accept contributions from another similar 401k plan that has the same tax preferred structure. And if not, something else that you can do so that you don't have to pay taxes on the retirement account is to roll it over into an IRA. So you have a couple of different options when you change jobs to make sure you don't get hit with a tax penalty from your employer savings. So this is one question which kind of goes back to what we were covering with Liz about kind of managing your overall in retirement and financial portfolio, as it were. So someone asked whether how to deal with large unexpected expenses. So this person said, you know, I'm planning for a wedding, which I wasn't expecting to do and didn't save for. How do I manage my retirement savings and other savings when I have a big expense like that? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? So I would say in the meantime that, you know, there are things that you can do with retirement savings at work, for example, which is, you know, you don't have to, if you are dealing with a large expense that you didn't previously save for, that might be the time where instead of increasing your retirement savings as you had been planning to do, you can freeze them. So I think looking at interest rates and kind of the time frame for when you need to pay those debts off if you have unexpected large expenses. Just look at where you can save, what makes sense, and where you're going to be, you know, penalized if you don't pay down the debt. You have to kind of look over at the whole picture overall.
I think Liz also made a great point, if I could just tack on to that, that it really helps if you, I mean, even if you're just putting, you know, 1% or 2% of your salary or whatever it is that your employer is going to match, you know, sometimes it's like maybe up to 3%. If it's already off the table for you, you know, pre-tax contribution, I think that's a big, that goes a long way. So you won't touch it if it's already being taken out manually, you know, before you even get your paycheck. I think that is a key thing for me, at least.
Yeah, and I'll continue with that as well. I mean, sometimes the tough thing is like also, again, looking at your overall expenses. I think sometimes people don't sit down and actually look at their income and all of their expenses and where they can make cuts, and sometimes you just have to make those a little bit of a lifestyle change, especially if it's, you know, for a short amount of time like a wedding, or even if it is like something like big bills with student loans. Sometimes you just kind of have to make that tough call just to make sure you can get that 1 or 2% or 3% for your retirement.
Thank you. So I see that we're running close to the hour and we want to be respectful of people's time. The last 2 slides in the PowerPoint have different resources for you. So we have resources both through the National Women's Law Center and the Roosevelt Institute. We hope that you'll like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And then we do have some resources available on our website. We also want to flag that for those folks or folks in your lives who are approaching retirement age, we have a second webinar, which is free, on December 13th, and that's from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. And so we want to make sure that that's on your radar screen Even if you're thinking about, well, I'm looking at my career, I want to have a sense about where this savings trajectory will take me. It's information that you can sock away and put in the back of your mind, and hopefully that will also help you plan for your eventual retirement. Next slide, please. And then we do have some other slides from other great organizations that do retirement and Social Security related work, and so those are here for you. And as we come closer to the end of the hour, I want to take the opportunity to thank my co-panelists here for their time and the great information that they shared with us. And thanks to all of you for participating in this webinar and hopefully taking the steps that you need to take to help secure your retirement in the future. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Yum-hee to close us out.
Thank you again to all our speakers today. This was really useful information. And to everyone listening, please feel free to email us any questions we didn't answer, and we'll make sure to send you a response within the next few days. And again, thank you everyone for attending, and please stay tuned for the second part of this webinar series happening December 13th from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And thanks again for joining us. Have a great afternoon, everyone.